Hi, and welcome to the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Let That Old Story Go, Freeing Yourself from Past Loves episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who want to stop suffering in relationship and who want a deeper sense of love and connection. I coach them how to do it and how to be the best version of themselves and live the life they love. For a good portion of my life, there was a subconscious narrative, a story I was telling myself. She's going to leave me, so I better leave first. And this goes back to my first real crush. I'll call her Faith. When I was about 12 years old, I had the biggest crush on Faith, and I was terrified to let her know for fear that she didn't feel the same way. I remember asking a mutual friend what I should do, and she encouraged me to tell her. I took this as a good sign, since she was such good friends with Faith. Well, I didn't have the guts to tell her face to face, so since we were neighbors, I decided to put a note in her mailbox. It was a very simple note, I like you, do you like me, basically. I waited nervously to hear her response. And it wasn't until 3 days later that I found her note in my mailbox. And with my heart pounding, I eagerly opened the note, and it said that she liked me. I couldn't believe it. I was ecstatic. So we started talking and hanging out. Well, fast forward about a month or so, I was just getting home late from school one day when I saw her on the front porch sitting with this guy who was a couple of years older than her, and they were holding hands. I felt like I got punched in the gut. It hurt. I ran really fast by her house and went straight to my house and slammed the door shut. I was devastated, and I went up to my room and cried, feeling brokenhearted. Well, little did I know at the time that I had abandonment issues. I've mentioned this before on this podcast, how my mother gave custody of my older brother and me to my father when I was 8 years old, and subsequently she died of cardiac arrest when I was 13. I never saw her in between that time. So with Faith, I was abandoned again. Get it? Well, this had quite an impact on me and all of my relationships up until my second marriage. I mentioned this before too, how I would overlap relationships. And when I subconsciously feared that I may be abandoned by my girlfriend, my partner, or my wife, I would meet someone else, so I wouldn't be alone. It wasn't until I learned to let go of that old abandonment story that I learned how to be okay with myself, whether I was in a relationship or not, which freed me to be more authentic in relationship moving forward. So letting go of old stories from previous relationships, previous loves, is really crucial for the health and success of current relationships. It only makes sense. And it can be really hard, especially if you have no awareness of your subconscious patterns, and most of us don't. I hear over and over, why do I keep finding the same type of women to get in relationship with? Well, part of it is that your subconscious is familiar with that dynamic. We tend to gravitate to what we know, even when it's not good for us. It's familiar and it's comfortable. I'll give you an example with Cameron's story. And of course, that is not his real name. I changed the names to protect their real identity and for confidentiality's sake. Anyway, Cameron had had his share of relationships. And at some point in all of his relationships, he would end them because he felt like he was being nagged all the time. It was always about what he was doing wrong, and hardly ever was he acknowledged for what he did right. He felt criticized and didn't feel appreciated, and so he would leave. Then he met Carmen, not her real name, and things were different with her. Carmen appreciated Cameron's strengths and wasn't the nagging type. Cameron felt like she was the one, and their relationship grew to where they soon ended up getting engaged. Well, as time went on, Cameron's subconscious patterns creeped in, where he was actually behaving in a way to get Carmen to nag him. And again, this was subconscious. An example was one evening after dinner, Carmen had asked Cameron if he could help her with the dishes. Now, instead of seeing it as a simple ask from Carmen, right away, Cameron got all defensive and was like, "You're always on my back about something, blah, 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 blah." And Carmen was like, "Whoa, hold up," and explained to Cameron that all she was trying to do was simply ask for some help with the dishes. She was pissed and stormed off. And again, remind you, this was his subconscious behavior. He wasn't doing it consciously on purpose. It was his old pattern from his past relationships. Well, this pattern persisted, and as a result, their relationship began to suffer. Carmen was repeatedly being accused of things she wasn't doing, and more, she felt unappreciated. Finally, Carmen called the engagement off. And this hit Cameron hard because he really loved Carmen and thought she was the one. And it shook him to the point where he decided to get some help, and he found a therapist. In therapy, he discovered something that created a major shift in his mind. When he was growing up, his mom would constantly nag him. She would always bring up what he didn't do, and again, hardly ever acknowledged any of his good stuff. Subsequently, he got in relationships where this dynamic kept showing up. Also through therapy, Cameron realized he had been projecting his unresolved feelings from his mom and all his past partners onto Carmen, which wasn't fair. You know, the subconscious story he had running under the surface was that all women nag. Well, with this new awareness, Cameron got to work on letting go of this story. He learned how to express how he was feeling and how to communicate what he needed in a healthier way. And after doing the work, Cameron reached out to Carmen with a sincere apology, owning what he had done. And after explaining to Carmen what he had learned about himself, what he was working on, and that he was committed to change, Carmen saw something in Cameron that she hadn't seen before, and as a result, agreed to give their relationship another shot. Now, I don't know if they are living happily ever after or not, but thank God Cameron got some help. He was going down a slippery slope of some serious suffering in his relationships. So I want to ask you now to reflect and ask yourself, are there any old stories from previous lovers or relationships you need to let go of? And think about your childhood. Be honest with yourself. And think hard about this, because letting go is critical for your relationship to survive. You know, holding on to negative stories can keep you stuck in a painful pattern of anger and resentment. And letting go of these stories can help you heal emotionally. You know, taking away a lot of unnecessary stress for you and your relationship. If you hold on tight to the old stories, it can come through in how you communicate, and it can lead to misunderstandings like with Cameron and Carmen. When you let go, you can clear the air and communicate from a more authentic place. It can help you create a deeper connection. By letting go of the old stories and patterns, you create the opportunity to build trust and a better sense of security in the relationship. If past issues from previous lovers keep coming up, it can wear down trust. Another thing that can wear down when you bring in your emotional baggage from old relationships is intimacy. Think about it. That old emotional baggage from your old relationship, not very sexy. In fact, it's a big turnoff. Letting go of that old shit allows you to be more vulnerable and open, which in turn leads to more emotional and physical intimacy. Holding on to negative stories can cause you to fall into blame and become defensive, which ultimately leads to feeling disconnected, right? By letting go of the old stories, you can have a more positive mindset and respond with empathy and compassion. And you're also more likely to want to commit to your own personal growth and the growth of your relationship. Now, research backs all of this up. Yeah, and again, letting go of the old stories and negative past relationships is so important in keeping your relationship healthy. And a big part of the healing and the letting go is forgiveness. Yeah, man, and understanding forgiveness is for you, not your ex, your parents, or whoever. It's more for you. And it's not about forgetting either. It's about letting go of the charge, the trigger, and the energy that's connected to it. Forgive and set yourself free from the burden of holding on to all that anger and resentment and those negative patterns that can destroy your relationship. Now, if you need help with this, there's no shame. I can help you, and there's tons of other help out here as well. I found this quote on Pinterest from an unknown source, and it says, quote, "If you carry old bricks from your past relationship to your new one, you will end up building the same house that fell apart before." Unquote. Oh man, I love it. And that will do it for this episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast. The Let That Old Story Go, Freeing Yourself from Past Loves episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Coming up on the next episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, it's a bonus episode, a conversation with the host of the Don't Pick the Scab podcast, which I had the pleasure of being a guest. He's also the author of the book, It's Okay to Hate Your Ex. Now I've got to hear what this guy has to say, right? It's the It's Okay to Hate Your Ex with author David Webb bonus episode. Now, if you like what you're hearing on this episode, please let other people know about it. Whether it's your friends, neighbors, your church, or folks on social media, whatever. The world needs more love. So please share the link and share the love. And if you have any issues in your relationship you need help with, or would like a free coaching session with me on how to communicate better in relationship, just go to my website, menonthepathtolove.com. You can also download my free cheat sheet, 5 ways to communicate better in relationship. It's all at menonthepathtolove.com. Check it out. And until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.